Did you know that more than 70,000 LGBTQ+ individuals in the U.S. die each year without ever having their stories truly heard? From Stephen Gately's sudden passing at the height of fame to Stormé DeLarverie's quiet departure after helping spark a revolution. Here are 20 gay celebrities you didn't know passed away. 1. Stephen Gately. Stephen Gately lived a life that many would call a dream, at least on the outside. He was part of Boyzone, a famous Irish boy band that hit #1 again and again in the UK. Fans screamed his name, posters of him were everywhere, and the music played on radios all the time. But behind all the lights, there was a truth many ignored. In 1999, Stephen said he was gay, and it shocked many people. Some supported him, but others weren't so kind. Being honest about who he was changed everything. He didn't just come out for himself, but for others too. It was a big step in a time when many stars still had to hide. Stephen stood out not just for his voice, but for his bravery. Still, the pressure didn't stop. Being famous is hard enough, but being gay and famous? That's a battle many don't see. He had to smile on stage while dealing with harsh words behind closed doors. In 2006, he married Andrew Cowles, something that should have been a happy moment. But media didn't always show the joy. Some just waited for a scandal. Then, in 2009, tragedy came. Stephen died from a heart problem he didn't even know he had. It wasn't substances or anything reckless, just a silent condition that took him too soon. Fans were shocked, but the world moved on quickly. 2. Carl Bean. Carl Bean had a voice that reached far, but it wasn't just the sound, it was the message. When he sang I Was Born This Way in 1977, it wasn't just a song. It was a call to be seen, a cry for acceptance. That song became a kind of anthem for people who felt ignored or unloved. But Carl didn't stop with music. He stepped into something bigger. In 1982, he created a church where people who had been pushed out of faith could belong. The Unity Fellowship Church movement wasn't just a place of worship, it was a safe space. For many Black LGBTQ+ people, it was one of the only places they could be both gay and faithful. Carl also started the Minority AIDS Project in Los Angeles. He saw how the disease was hurting his community and knew something had to be done. He helped people when others turned their backs. And still, outside those spaces, few people knew his name. He gave his whole life to lifting others, but the world stayed quiet about him. When he died in 2021 at 77, many media outlets barely said a word. Why? He wasn't a pop star. He didn't win flashy awards. But his impact was huge, bigger than most. So why didn't the world stop and really honor him? Carl Bean wasn't just a singer or preacher. He was a fighter, a man who stood up again and again when others were silent. People like him change lives quietly. 3. Colin Higgins. Colin Higgins didn't look like a rebel, but with each movie he made, he pushed back at a world that didn't want to hear him. He was the mind behind Harold and Maude, a film that made people laugh, think, and feel something deep. Later, he directed the comedy 9 to 5, a film still loved today. But not many people knew the real Colin. He was gay, and he didn't hide it, even when Hollywood would rather pretend he didn't exist. Back then, coming out could ruin your whole career. But Colin didn't back down. He used his art to tell stories that mattered, stories about people who were different and proud. In 1985, he learned he had HIV. That news would scare anyone, but it didn't stop him. Instead, he started the Colin Higgins Foundation in 1986 to help LGBTQ+ youth. He wanted kids like him to feel seen and safe. While others ran away from the AIDS crisis, Colin did the opposite. He got closer. He tried to make change with the little time he had left. He died in 1988, only 47 years old. The world was losing so many then, but Colin's loss still cuts deep. He gave everything, his work, his fight, and his heart. Today, his name is often left out of film history. People love the movies, but forget the man behind them. Why? Was he too open? Too different? The industry he helped shape barely speaks of him now, but that silence speaks loudly. Colin Higgins should be remembered, not just for the films, but for the courage it took to keep making them. 4. Dirk Schaefer, 1962-2015. Dirk Schaefer lived in a world full of contradictions. In 1992, Playgirl named him Man of the Year, putting him on a pedestal of ideal manhood. Women swooned, men envied, but Dirk wasn't living the life everyone thought. He was gay and hiding it because that's what the job seemed to demand. In a world that only wanted to see him as a straight heartthrob, Dirk played along, but it tore at him. The pressure to be someone he wasn't built up year after year. He finally spoke out in his own way. In 1995, he made a film called Man of the Year, where he exposed the lie he had been forced to live. He showed the fake smiles, the silence, the loneliness. It wasn't just a movie, it was a warning. Even when he directed more films like Circuit, which dove into the gay party scene, the public didn't take him seriously. The media didn't treat him like other directors. There was always a gap between what he gave and what he got in return. In 2015, he was found dead in his car. The cause? An overdose and maybe heart disease. The headlines focused on substances, but no one asked why a man with so much talent and pain ended up alone in that car. What pushed him there? What was he trying to escape? Dirk spent his life battling an image that wasn't his, and it wore him down. We saw the abs and the smile, but we missed the hurt. Amir Fraser Gutman. Amir Gutman wasn't just a singer. He was a symbol of bravery in a place where honesty came with a price. He started in the boy band High Five, and in Israel they were big, really big. People loved his voice, his looks, his charm. But Amir held a truth that many tried to hide. He was gay, and when he came out, it was a huge moment. Few celebrities in Israel had done that before. He didn't just share his truth, he fought for others. He stood up for gay rights, marched for change, and used his fame to push for love and fairness. But in 2016, things took a dark turn. Doctors told him he had T-cell lymphoma. It was serious, so he went through heavy treatments. Chemo, hospital visits, pain. Then they found out it was all a mistake. He didn't have cancer. He had something much less dangerous. The treatments had been for nothing. His body and spirit had suffered, and it could not be undone. But Amir didn't stop fighting. He wanted justice, and he kept going, even when he was tired. In 2017, he went to the beach with his family. When he saw his niece struggling in the waves, he didn't think twice. He jumped in and saved her. But the waves were strong and they pulled him under. He died a hero, but also a victim of a broken system, of medical failure, of constant pressure. Amir's story should be shouted, not whispered. 6. Gregory Gray. Gregory Gray, who was first known as Paul Lerwill, had a life full of sharp turns and brave choices. He came from Northern Ireland, a place not always welcoming to people who were different. Starting out in a 1970s boy band called Rosetta Stone, he looked like any other pop star at the time. But that image was just the beginning. Later, he changed his name to Mary Cigarettes and began making music that sounded nothing like his old band. His songs were strange, bold, and sometimes hard to follow, but they were always honest. He tried many styles, mixing pop, punk, jazz, and even electronic dance sounds. He didn't want to fit into just one box. He wanted to say something deeper, even if people didn't always listen. Gregory was one of the first openly gay musicians from Ireland. That may sound simple today, but back then it could have cost him his career. Or worse. Still, he spoke out. He didn't hide who he was. But even with all that courage, people barely talk about him now. When he died in 2019 in his quiet home in England, the world barely noticed. No big headlines, no music awards in his name. Just silence. Isn't that strange? A man who gave everything to be true to himself is now mostly forgotten. Why do people who follow the rules get remembered while those who take risks get ignored? Gregory Gray wasn't just a musician, he was a fighter, and yet it seems the world closed the book on him far too soon. 7. Bété Born, 1939 to 2024. Bété Born did more than act. He used the stage to shake things up. He didn't just wear fancy clothes and makeup. He used drag to speak up, to fight back, to change how people thought about men, women, and everything in between. He led the Blue Lips, a group of wild, fearless performers who used bright costumes and bold words to tell the truth, no matter how hard it was to hear. They didn't just entertain. They made people think, made them squirm, made them wonder why some things were still taboo. And Bet was always at the front, pushing the limits. Even when he stepped into more classic plays like As You Like It or The Importance of Being Earnest, he brought that same fire with him. He played roles with power, with passion, and with full pride in who he was. He worked with young LGBTQ+ artists, helping them find their voice. But as the years passed, his voice got quieter. Dementia took hold, and when he died in 2024 at the age of 84, barely anyone talked about it. Where were the tributes? Where were the headlines? A man who gave so much, who stood strong in the face of hate, and yet the world barely noticed he was gone. 8. Stormé DeLarverie, 1920 to 2014. Stormé DeLarverie was the kind of person who changed the world without asking for a thank you. She was born in New Orleans to a black mother and white father, and her childhood was full of unfairness. She didn't fit neatly into the boxes people tried to put her in, and that followed her into adulthood. But instead of hiding, she fought back. As a drag king, she dressed as a man on stage and became a star in the Jewel Box Revue, the first racially mixed drag show in North America. That alone was huge. But Stormé didn't stop there. She walked through the streets with purpose, keeping her community safe. She became a protector when others looked the other way. Some say she threw the first punch at the Stonewall riots in 1969, a moment many see as the start of the modern LGBTQ+ rights movement. Whether she did or didn't, she was there, fighting, standing up. And after that night, she never stopped helping others. She worked as a bouncer and patrolled the streets of New York, making sure queer people had someone looking out for them. When she passed away at 93, most people didn't even hear about it. How could that be? A woman who helped launch a movement was laid to rest, and the world just moved on. 9. The Vivian. The Vivian, born James Lee Williams, lit up every stage she walked on. Winning the first ever season of RuPaul's Drag Race UK in 2019, she seemed unstoppable. Her drag was polished, her wit was sharp, and her impersonations could make a room roar with laughter. But behind all the lights and makeup was someone who struggled more than people knew. She opened up about her battles with substances and alcohol, using her story to help others. She didn't have to tell the world about her pain, but she did anyway, hoping it would make someone else feel less alone. She danced on Dancing on Ice, talked on talk shows, and showed pride in every space she entered. But even the strongest need support. In January 2025, at only 32 years old, she was gone, just like that. The news shocked fans. The silence afterward, even worse. No deep conversations about her pain, no big moves to protect others like her. Why does the world cheer so loudly for someone's rise but fall quiet when they need help most? Fame doesn't protect people from hurt. Sometimes it makes the pain even harder to carry. The Vivian gave everything she had to her fans, to her craft, to her community. But when she passed, it felt like the world shrugged. Why is it still so easy to ignore the ones who try to be real? Her life had meaning, and her death should too. 10. Heklina, 1967 to 2023. Heklina, born Stefan Gregelko, didn't just perform. She built something lasting. With Tranny Shack, her drag club in San Francisco, she created a place where people could be bold, loud, and free. It wasn't just about fun, it was about safety, expression, and truth. Heklina gave space to people who had nowhere else to go. She helped grow a scene that was often pushed out or ignored. And she did it with sharp humor, big heart, and an even bigger voice. She took drag on tour, reaching people across the globe. She knew that drag was more than a joke or costume. It was protest. It was power. But in April 2023, she was found dead in her London apartment. The news came fast and faded even faster. Where were the stories about what she built? Where were the honors, the thank yous, the lasting words? She gave her life to the drag world, and the silence after her death says more than words ever could. Why do we let the most important figures disappear from memory so easily? Heklina didn't follow trends. She made them, and yet her passing felt like just another headline. Why is it that even after everything she did, her name isn't carved into history where it belongs? This isn't just sad, it's wrong. And maybe it's time we stop letting these stories fade away so quietly. 11. Gloria Allen, 1945 to 2022. Gloria Allen, who many called Mama Gloria, helped young transgender people in ways few others did. She ran a charm school in Chicago where she taught them how to act with pride and respect. But there was more behind her kindness. Gloria had lived through years when being transgender meant facing hate, danger, and being left out by society. She kept going even when it was hard. She smiled for others while hiding the pain she carried alone. Yes, she was celebrated. There was a play made about her life, and even a full documentary film. But did those honors help her rest from the weight of always giving, always being strong for others? People praised her for teaching young people how to hold their heads high. But how many really looked past the praise to see how hard her days really were? How often did she cry behind closed doors after helping others all day? She was given awards like the Living Legend Award, yet many who clapped for her didn't stand beside her when things got tough. Her story was told in the media, but not everything was shared. How much did the world truly know about what she gave up, or how lonely it might have felt to be the one everyone leaned on? In June 2022, Gloria died in her sleep. Peacefully, they said. But did the world do enough for her while she was still awake? Her life helped many, but her death reminded us that strong people need help too. We lost someone powerful, someone real. Behind the name Mama Gloria was a woman who gave everything to others. 12. Cherry Valentine, 1993 to 2022. Cherry Valentine, whose real name was George Ward, lit up every room with color, style, and flair. But behind the makeup and dresses was someone trying to be heard. As a drag queen and mental health nurse, she lived two lives, one on stage and one trying to help people heal. She became well known on RuPaul's Drag Race UK, where the audience cheered for her looks and charm. But the cameras never really showed her sadness. How many really looked behind the glitter and saw the pain in her eyes? She was proud of who she was, but carried the heavy memories of growing up in the traveler community, where being different was not always safe. She made a documentary about it, showing her roots and her fight to be accepted. Still, it seemed like the world liked the image of Cherry more than they listened to George. She talked about mental health and being proud, but how often did anyone check on her mental health? How often was she left alone with her thoughts when the lights went off? Cherry died in September 2022 at just 28 years old. Her death shocked many, but the signs had always been there, hidden under layers of glitter and performance. She gave so much to the world, but the world didn't give enough back. Her story is not just about fame, but about how easily people forget that even stars can fall when no one is there to catch them. She should have been more than a headline. She should have been helped. Her voice is quiet now, but the pain behind it still echoes. 13. Hector Extravaganza. Hector Extravaganza, born Hector Crespo, was more than just a part of New York's ballroom scene. He helped build it. He brought beauty, strength, and style to the stage. But behind every move was a real man fighting battles people didn't want to talk about. He helped spread the truth about HIV and AIDS, working to save lives when others stayed silent. He helped start the House of Latex project, trying to protect people in his community. He didn't just talk, he acted. He cared. And yet many forgot how much he gave. The show Pose told stories like his, and Hector helped behind the scenes. But his own story often got left out. He was there before it was popular, before it was safe. He lived through times when being gay, being bold, or being sick meant being ignored. He stood tall in rooms where he wasn't welcomed. How many people thanked him? How many remembered? He died in December 2018 at just 53 years old. His name faded faster than it should have. People danced to his style, spoke his words, but left his face out of history. He was more than fashion, more than a scene. He was a lifeline for many. He fought hard, gave more, and stood when others couldn't. Now he's gone, and too few talk about him. 14. Mark Dobies. Mark Dobies played powerful roles on TV, especially in daytime soap operas. On One Life to Live, he was a man hiding a big truth. His character was secretly gay. The story was deep, full of pain, and made people think. But not many noticed that behind the acting, Mark understood that story too well. He wasn't just reading lines. He was showing a truth that he knew in his own life. He was part of a world where being honest could still hurt your career. He also performed in the theater, taking a strong role in The Normal Heart, a play about the early days of AIDS. That show was raw, full of emotion, and real. It talked about fear, loss, and silence. Mark stood on that stage and gave everything. But when the curtain closed, did anyone ask how he felt? Or was he just another face who told hard stories no one wanted to live? He died in March 2025 at 65 years old. The news came quietly. Few people looked back at what he gave. He showed people the truth through his roles, but his real story stayed in the background. Mark Dobies gave the world pieces of himself through TV and theater, but not enough people saw the man behind the roles. He left the world as quietly as he lived. 15. Maisie Trolette, 1933 to 2025. Maisie Trolette, whose real name was David Raven, brought laughter and glitter to Britain's drag stages for over 50 years. He wasn't just a performer, he was history in makeup. He began in the 1960s, a time when dressing in drag could get you arrested or worse. He kept going. He sang, he danced, he made people laugh. But did anyone really look at what he had to go through just to be on stage? He performed at places like the Black Cap and Two Brewers and became a symbol at Brighton Pride. People clapped, cheered, and took pictures. But after the lights went down, he was just David again, a man who had fought for a world that didn't always love him back, a man who lost friends, watched others fade, and kept performing while carrying memories that hurt. His face smiled, but his eyes knew loss. In 2022, a film was made about him, trying to tell his story. But no camera could show the whole truth. No movie could share the silence after the crowd leaves. He died in March 2025 at 91, the oldest drag performer in Britain. People remembered him then. 16. Apollo Moon, 1969 to 2024. Apollo Moon lived for performance, but behind the bright lights, heavy makeup, and costumes was a man who felt unseen by the world. He was more than just a drag artist or stage actor. He was a truth-teller in a world that often didn't want to hear the truth. Apollo performed in small theaters, underground clubs, and quiet corners of the LGBTQ+ community. He told stories that hurt, stories that mattered. Each time he stepped on stage, he gave people who felt invisible a moment of hope. But most people outside his circle never even knew his name. Why do the loudest voices get ignored when they speak from the heart? He used his art as a way to survive and to help others feel strong. Apollo taught many young performers how to speak up through their own talents. He helped people find pride in who they were, even when the world told them to hide. But outside the community, there was silence. No awards, no big news stories, just silence. When Apollo died in 2024 at age 55, it felt like the world barely blinked. His life mattered, his message mattered, but he didn't get the same goodbye others did. Why is it that people who fight the hardest for others are remembered the least? His passing left behind a hole, not just in the theater, but in every space where people needed courage. Apollo gave so much. And yet his legacy barely got a headline. It makes you wonder, how many other voices are lost this way? How many stories go untold just because they came from someone the world refused to look at? Apollo Moon lived a brave life, but the world didn't look long enough to see it. 17. Tim Kruger, 1981 to 2025. Tim Kruger lived a life many people judged without ever really understanding it. Born Marcel Bon, he became known in the adult film world, a space most people pretend not to see. But Tim saw it as more than just work. He made it his career, his business, and his platform. When he started acting in 2006, he quickly gained attention for being bold, professional, and honest about who he was. By 2009, he had created Tim Tales, a company that gave space to adult performers who were often left out of the mainstream. But did the world respect what he built, or did they just turn their backs on him? Tim wasn't just an actor. He was a businessman. He gave opportunities to people in his industry. He gave voices to those often pushed aside, but many ignored all of this. They only saw the work he did, not the person behind it. When he passed away in 2025 at just 44, there was barely a whisper. Why is it that certain careers make people disappear in the eyes of the world? Why do we pretend some lives are less valuable? He died in his home in Barcelona, alone, quietly. A man who had spent years building something real was suddenly gone, and very few even noticed. He stood proudly in a space most people try to shame, and for that, he paid a heavy price in how he was remembered. His work helped others find safety and pride. He built something lasting, but because of what he chose to do for a living, it seems like that legacy was buried with him. 18. Gavin Creel. Gavin Creel was the kind of star who could fill a room with just his voice. He had a way of bringing people to tears, not just with his songs, but with his heart. Known for shows like Hair, Thoroughly Modern Millie, and the 2017 revival of Hello Dolly, he reached heights many performers only dream of. But even with a Tony Award in his hands and standing ovations from Broadway crowds, Gavin was fighting something bigger behind the curtain. He battled an aggressive form of sarcoma, a rare and painful illness. And even as his body grew tired, he never stopped shining. He wasn't just an actor, he was an activist. He co-founded Broadway Impact, a group that fought for marriage equality and LGBTQ+ rights. Gavin used his fame for something larger than himself. But when he passed away in 2024 at just 48, it felt like the world moved on too quickly. Why do some stars only get remembered for their roles and not their real battles? Why is bravery off stage so easy to ignore? Gavin's legacy is more than applause. It's in the rights he fought for, the lives he inspired, and the love he gave. He sang not just for entertainment, but for change. Yet the silence after his passing was deafening. Broadway lost a giant, but outside the theater, barely anyone seemed to notice. Why do we wait until someone is gone to realize how loud their voice truly was? Gavin deserved more. His life meant more. The spotlight faded too fast, and the echoes of his message still haven't reached far enough. 19. Andre Leon Talley, 1948 to 2022. Andre Leon Talley didn't just work in fashion, he helped shape it. He walked through the industry wearing bold robes, standing tall, and saying things that made people stop and think. As a black gay man in a space often ruled by white voices, he pushed his way into rooms that were never made for him. He was once fashion news director at Vogue, later editor-at-large. But even with all his titles, it often felt like the world only let him rise so far. How can someone so powerful still be kept just outside the gates? He fought for diversity. He supported black designers. He showed that beauty comes in many colors and styles. His look was unforgettable, and so were his words. But his career wasn't without pain. He spoke often about the loneliness and the struggles of fitting into a world that didn't want him to belong. When he passed in 2022 at age 73, many praised his career, but few spoke of the walls he had to break through. Why does it take death for people to see the full picture? His life was a loud statement in a quiet, controlled world. He made fashion better. He made it real. But even with all that, it still seems like he had to fight for every bit of credit he got. His passing should have rocked the fashion world harder than it did. 20. Leslie Jordan, 1955 to 2022. Leslie Jordan made the world laugh, but his real life was filled with quiet strength. He was small in size, just 4 feet 11, but his energy filled every room he entered. Known best for roles in Will and Grace and American Horror Story, he took characters meant to be funny side notes and turned them into something unforgettable. He was openly gay at a time when it wasn't easy. He never hid who he was. Even when others wanted him to be quiet, he stayed true to himself. When the world shut down during the COVID pandemic, Leslie's voice became a source of comfort. His videos online made people smile when they needed it most. He wasn't trying to be famous again. He was just being himself, funny, honest, and real. But even after winning an Emmy and building a huge following, his death in 2022 at age 67 didn't shake the world the way it should have. Why do we celebrate people only when it's too late? Why does being kind and brave not seem enough to earn lasting respect? Leslie gave so much joy. He carried pain, but still made others feel light. His legacy should have been huge. Instead, it feels like the world moved on too fast. The laughs he gave, the bravery he showed, those things mattered. But the world never quite knew what to do with someone like him.